Good afternoon, colleagues. That's our monthly review of the economy of Ukraine, economy in October, and a special topic about the business loans that they're returning. Will that be sustainable? My name is Hryvnia. I'm working for the Center of Economic Strategy. I will be moderating our today's meeting, and then Maxim Samolyuk, our columnist, will pick this on. And this event we are doing together with the German economic team, with our partners who are working on request of the German government. We also have a partner, and we have the simultaneous translation. You can turn on English translation. In the first part of our event, we will be, as usual, talking at some major changes that took place in the economy of Ukraine during October. And one of these changes is what we would call the sustainable tendency related to the growth of the corporate lending. The positive aspect is something that we would want to pay additional attention and to analyze it as detailed as possible, and that's why we would like to ask our experts. You can leave your questions in the Q&A session during the event. So now I would like to ask Gary Polushkin to join us. That's the project manager of Joint Economic Team in Ukraine.
Many thanks. Warm welcome from Berlin to all participants. My name is Gary Polushkin. It's a great pleasure for me as project manager for Ukraine of the German economic team to introduce this today's webinar, as I introduced many of them before. The German economic team is an economic policy advisory project financed by the German Ministry for Economic Affairs and Climate Action, and has been active in advising the Ukrainian government and state institutions for more than 15 years. And this webinar, in the partnership with the Center for Economic Strategy, is an important opportunity to discuss the state of the economy, which is a regular part of this event, as well as today's important topic, the development of corporate loans. Russia's full-scale war has been causing extraordinary changes and challenges to Ukraine's banking and financial sector. While deposits remained stable and no bank runs occurred, the loan volume fell at the same level as the GDP. But most recently, there is an upward development that makes more hope in this regard. Is this development just a one-moment effect, or are business loans on a sustainable recovery path? How are demand and supply side affected, and what is the impact for Ukraine's reconstruction? These are very interesting and important questions that are going to be discussed, and I'm very delighted that the Center for Economic Strategy has put this aspect in today's discussion. I look forward to an interesting dialogue, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. And I will pass the floor to our colleagues in order to make a review of the Ukrainian economy in October. I would like to ask Maxim to say what you have prepared and look forward to your presentation. Welcome, colleagues. Welcome all the participants of today's event. We are starting, as usual, from our overall review in October, what was happening in October, with a special emphasis on our today's special topic. At the front, we have more intense fighting going on in all of its parts. At the same time, no large-scale attacks on energy infrastructure were not recorded. No large-scale attacks were recorded this month. The temporary sea corridor introduced by Ukraine to renew maritime access to Odessa Post has been operating, but on November 8th, Russia attacked one of the civilian cargo ships in Odessa that was reaching, that could negatively affect the further development of this export-imports corridor. Hopefully, this will not create a significant harm. What concerns the macroeconomic trends, how the economy is developing, NBU in its fresh report have improved the expectation for GDP. They forecast the growth to 4.9% in 2023. The key reasons for that is the further adaptation of the society to the war, the gradual improvement of the exports, logistics, good harvest, which has become a good indicator, a factor this year, and higher budget spending that was expected in 2023. In the future, the economy will continue to renew. Nevertheless, the NBU is forecasting that by the end of 2025, the economy of Ukraine will not yet reach the pre-war condition because of the huge losses that we encountered mostly last year, but partially also this year. Inflation will remain moderate. In the coming years, it will speed up in 2024, but again, coming closer to the target level at 6, foreign aid will continue to be crucial for financing the budget and economy of Ukraine. In October, we also had the deterioration in terms of business expectations. The level got lower than neutral. Together with the business expectations, also the consumers' expectations deteriorated. The military risks continue to prevail, logistical challenges, although there are some improvements, the decrease in the investment demand, increase in fuel prices, and the shortage of labor. A few words about the sectoral analysis. The energy sector at the moment is stable. In October, we exported 69,000 megawatt of electric energy, and export overperformed import, although there was already the worsening of the weather and the winter is around the corner. Nevertheless, we were above in exports. Also, in the beginning of November, we had for the first time the interconnector electric energy at the cross-border connections already with the European rules. That has given us the possibility to renew exports to Romania and potentially can allow to export to Hungary. As I said, no significant large-scale attacks were recorded, which gives us additional valuable time for the business, for the citizens to be better prepared for the winter. Ukraine continues to accumulate necessary storage volumes of gas and coal. And again, the stability at the energy sector gives additional time for that. In October, we had the further decrease in terms of ferrous production by 3.2% versus September. For the future, the key problem remains is very difficult logistics for the metallurgical producers. Only a small fraction of what is produced by our metallurgical companies can be consumed locally. Taking the data from Ukroboronprom during the 9 months of 2023, for instance, out of 3.9 tons of rolled steel products produced in Ukraine, only half, actually less than half, was consumed in Ukraine. The rest was exported. Correspondingly, the sector that before the war was exporting 4/5 of its production before the war, it requires much more improved sea logistics, and we can see the first good signs in this sea corridor, and we hope that this will continue to improve. Also, happily, thanks to this temporary sea corridor, in October we grew in terms of exports of oilseeds and grains versus previous month. Here we additionally see that Russia is trying to limit us as soon as possible in terms of blocking this sea corridor. We can see that fewer ships are entering our ports, but the ones who are entering and leaving, they are carrying oilseeds and grains. The Ministry of Agriculture and the Ukrainian Grain Association improved their export um, forecasts, and the overall production of harvest has improved. So this volume will have to be taken out. And again, that's the issue of logistics that is number one here. It's also important that this year, the good harvest through the good weather. Next year, hopefully, maybe this will not be the case. And it's very naturally that the harvest of 2024 naturally can be lower.
Дякую, Максиме.
Thank you, Maxim.
Далі я передаю
I would like
слово
to pass the
Юрію.
floor
Вітаю з
to
такою
Yuri
можливістю.
Haidai, our
Зараз
senior economist
тебе
of the Center of Economic Strategy. Yuri, you had quite a hot month, a lot of activities in terms of the budget, but mostly for the future year. But the situation with the budget now is very much demonstrative in terms of showing what we should be planning for the next year. Please, Yuri, the floor is yours.
Юра, ти на м'юті.
Yuri, you are muted.
Дякую.
Sorry, thank you.
Приховав панель і не
I
шукав, де розмістити.
hit the panel, so I was searching for a long time where to find it. Okay, so let us start with our foreign financing, the part that concerns the fiscal sector. In October, Ukraine received 1.6 billion hryvnia from the European Union in the form of a loan, and the last piece of the grant from the United States in the amount of $1.15 billion. So we can see that the future financing, it's already Congress needs to approve further financing. As you can see, that the last 3 months, these significant finances are not enough for covering our needs, especially the debt. But luckily, now the Ministry of Finances is actually quite good in terms of coping through internal borrowings. So the issue is not that acute. And if we look at the 10 months that have passed, we have the needs to finance the deficit and servicing the debt in the amount of almost $47 billion. And the 35 billion arrived from our foreign financing partners. And that has helped us for 10 months to be without any monetary financing. And we can see the results also in terms of the inflation indicators, which factually are not that bad, even for the peaceful times, but especially when we talk about the developed countries. So that's a good indicator. With that said, the financing gap until the end of the year, something that was promised to us, but okay, considering the needs of the budget for financing, this gap is 12 billion because we had more spending in the state budget. And there were more. We can see that the further growth continues in terms of VAT. In October, we had 66%. This was on average more than half a year. The role of VAT is growing, and that's also an issue, how we don't have I'm not talking about the corporate financing. We had some small revenues for using the natural resources. This will be interesting to see the detailed statistics about the excises during October, but so far it's not there yet. Regarding the expenditures, we have some changes. The monthly defense spending doubled. They reached already 285 billion. That is, if I'm not mistaken, the biggest amount throughout historically, and that's only the expenditures for defense. Out of them, if we look a breakdown, 69 billion are coming as expenditures for providing the army. No, sorry, 69 was for weapons and ammunitions, and 75 for the supplies of the army. Of course, details are further classified. And the increase that we had in the justice and law was this additional 8 billion hryvnia for the bodyguard and national guard. It's also important to add another 5 billion. For the first time, this amount came without the functional assignment on the classified program for the first time. And that is also a program that is aimed at improving the defense of the capacity of the country. So the aggregated spending on defense, they are not only the half, they are dominating the rest of the budget expenditures. Next month, we expect some lower because they can't be supported at such a high level for all the time. And a small review on some local budgets, if you want to look at it in more detail, if you want to look at the condition of the local budgets, please view the recording that we had. This means with the participation of the Ministry of Finances. We talked in a lot of detail the status of the local budgets and the changes in the budget code. I can only say that since the beginning of the year, we have the deficit of local budgets. It has decreased, this accumulated surplus, to 95 billion. This is explained by less taxes, less spending. But apart from that, from other significant factors, there was also more expenditure on construction and aiming funds into the charter capital of the communal companies. That's the months when the local authorities were expecting changes to the budget code, not knowing, whether this is one of the reasons for such a huge increase in spending, but we can see definitely the change in dynamics. So let's see how it will be the growth of expenditures during the last months, which is very characteristic of the last months. We see no special reserve for that in the first place, to something that the local governments can change. That's all from my side. I'm passing back to my colleague. Yes, Yuri, you're right. A lot has happened. Now I would like to ask to give the floor to Maria Tamirina, our economist, who, in addition to the general analysis in the monetary sphere and on the foreign currency market, she will also present our special, much more detailed about what was happening with the banking lending. I hope that you can see me, and maybe you can speak up a little bit. Maybe you can bring the microphone closer. Just talk a little bit more loudly. Yeah, that's better. So let us move to the analysis of the monetary policy. First of all, let us look at the situation at the foreign currency market. During 1 month, the NBU is exercising this guided flexibility. They're controlling the situation on the foreign currency market and remains the key market player and takes care of the deficit. And that's why the fluctuations of the rates were minimum. At the cash markets, we saw even the revaluation. What concerns the international reserves, based on October, they decreased by 1.9%, reaching $39 billion because of the biggest volume of sold foreign currency during the last 12 months in order to cover the gap between supply and demand in the market, which was compensated by the funding received from international partners. At the same time, the level of international reserves remains quite high and provides financing of 5 months of the future imports. Let us look at the key rates. The NBU has cut the public key rate. They has cut the key rate to 16%, and working very nice with overnight certificates. The rest of the rates are remained intact. Also, the committee, in terms of its monetary policy, the members of the NBU mentioned even the further possible decrease of the key rate in December. The yield of one-year hryvnia war bonds gradually declined to 17.3%, and at the end of October, the average rate on retail deposits remained the same. For 3 months deposits, they more or less were the same level as September. In October, the inflation declined to 5.3% in the yearly figures. If we look at the inflation, the prices in October grew by 0.8, and since the beginning of the year, the inflation has amounted 3.8%. The price of food products increased by 1% over 1 month. The biggest was with vegetables and eggs. The prices for transport increased by 1.5% due to an increase in the price of fuel and lubricants. Nevertheless, this price dynamics is seeing fixation of tariffs and quite a good stability at the foreign currency market. So let's come to our main topic, the banking sector. Let's first look at the deposits, and then we will be talking about lending. So throughout October, the number of deposits has grown. Looking at the inflation that has decreased, the volume of term deposits has increased. So we can see that foreign exchange on demand deposits continued in downward trends. The demand for hryvnia corporate loans increased, as did the demand for retail loans. The most banks expecting further growth in their corporate and retail loan portfolios. Some banks have also mentioned the increase in demand for the big companies. If we analyze the loans given to households, then more than 80% are consumer loans. Also, we have seen a slight decrease of the loans that were given to construction, purchasing of real estate. In terms of repayment, the share has improved, although the share of long-term decreased. If we analyze the corporate loans as at September, and the majority of loans were dispersed to wholesale and retail trade companies, agriculture, also in process manufacturing. On average, 70% of these loans were issued in national currency, the rest in foreign. In the structure of corporate loans, the changes were insignificant for the last 3 years. More than half of them are dispersed for current needs. We can also see the positive tendency in terms of medium loans and increasing the long-term loans. We have mentioned several times that the affordable loans within the 579 program have become the catalyzer of the levels of lending, and they will continue to 1/3 of the hryvnia corporate loans. And we can say in more detail, demonstrate what exactly is happening with 579 program. So if we look at the graph that is on the bottom left, we can see how the share of these loans is growing in the overall lending structure. If in September it was 11%, now at September that's almost 33%. The main users remain the agricultural sector and the sphere of services. the biggest number of loans given to the Kyiv-based companies and the oblast, as well as the Lviv, Dnipropetrovsk, and Odessa oblasts. Let's talk about the lending rates. They based on the NBU's modernized operational design of its monetary policy. The refinancing rate is plus 6 percentage points. This graph shows the average weighted lending rates for various subjects of economy, but in general, you can make a conclusion that the rates for financial corporations remained lower. Non-financial and financial corporations and sole proprietors have remained lower than NBU's refinancing rate, but we understand that a lot are taking loans under the 579, so that influences the average weighted indicator. Also, we can also mention that when the key rate was down, we also can see a decrease during the last months is the average indicator of the average weighted lending rate. And that's not only about 579 program and regular rates. The regular rates also have started to decrease. The lending rates for households have remained the highest, and the last year they returned to the pre-war level. It's more or less 30% per annum. And let us talk about the level of NPLs as at the 1st of October 2023. This was 422.5 billion hryvnia, which is 9.6 billion less than in January 2023. So the NPL ratio also decreased by 0.2 percentage point and reached now 37.9%. Also, this year, banks have been slower in recognizing credit losses compared to the previous year. Since the beginning of the full-scale war, they have set aside 107 billion, that is almost 13 of their performing loan portfolio, which they had at the end of February 2022. And now the ongoing resilience assessment of banks and the banking system indicates that overall banks are appropriately assessing their credit risks. That's all from my side. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you, Masha. I will now like to start my discussion. Those tendencies which we have seen here. We have today 4 participants of our discussion. I will name them, not by alphabet, but rather in the way that we have proposed to them to perform. In the first place, I would like to ask Pervin Dadashova, who is coming from the National Bank of Ukraine, and Andriy Gapon, who is the Executive Director of the Fund of Entrepreneurship that has the financing of the state Land 579 program. Also, I can see the representatives of various banks, the biggest state-owned banks, and the biggest private with the participation of lending. That's Yevgen Zagraev, the member of the board of Privatbank for small and medium business, and Natalia Gurina, who is coming from Raiffeisen Bank. So we have a very much balanced, how it seems to us, the list of participants for this discussion. So, Pervin, the National Bank is definitely analyzing your department that is responsible for the financial stability, is analyzing much more deep than what we have shown as main tendencies. I mean, we showed something to bring attention to the point that after 1.5 years of the full-scale war, we have seen the positive transit in terms of corporate lending. What is your impression? What is your vision based on the information that you are analyzing? What are the main indicators of this influence? Is this 579? The share of these loans is growing, but maybe not to that extent to explain all the tendency. Is this the decrease of rates through softening the monetary currency, or is this the decrease of demand from business in order to restore the investment programs, and whether this growth of lending, whether it bothers you or not.
Передусім дякую за запрошення і дякую за прекрасну презентацію, яка більш
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you for the invitation, and many thanks for the beautiful presentation. Your presentation is much more comprehensive than the banking sector, because the situation in the banking sector, we have the mirror of what is happening in the economy. We are to understand this wide picture working here, and we are ready to support with various conclusions. I will try to give my, and I will would like to show these tendencies and talk about the future.
Той момент, в якому ми перебуваємо зараз, про який ми будемо говорити,
So that moment that where we are now,
коли ми вже бачимо
this is the period when we already see throughout several months. That's a good sign of this tendency, the tendency of growing the hryvnia loan portfolio, net portfolio, and that is also certifies that the normal lending on market conditions is possible during the war. But this is not the first episode in lending. We have paid a lot of attention to this. It was even at the beginning of the full-scale invasion. There was the peak of lending, and since then, during quite a lengthy time, we saw the decrease of the portfolio. Now this tendency is on hold. It has turned around, and now we see that the hryvnia lending portfolio is growing. But in order to certify the recovery of the portfolio, at least to those levels that were shown in the beginning of this invasion, in essence, we need to compensate two important elements. The first element is the loss of the portfolio because of the direct aggression or through related with the crisis various financial difficulties of our borders, and this is significant losses. That's like 15% of the portfolio. And the second component, it's quite a suppressed demand that was prevailing for a long time. And now when we talk about the need to restore lending, that's a lengthy process that need to compensate these both components. And luckily, we can see that it lasts now. The quality of the lending portfolio is absolutely normal. It's sometimes even better than it was before the war. So the banks are not losing that much from the credit risk as they did some months ago. And from the other hand, yes, really, what we are certifying and what we see that the banks are also noticing this when they look at that the demand is growing. It's important to mention that this demand exists on the hryvnia loans. It's worth mentioning, it's an important tendency that the war effectively has destroyed the demand for the foreign currency lending, because that's in reality quite understandable. And that's a good indicator, because it would seem that all of these motives, to a great extent, they are biased to take loans in foreign currency that seemed like it is cheaper, but this brought negative consequences. The business doesn't have the real need in foreign currency. This practice has brought problems. Now, although the rate was stable for many years, although that we have this mode of the guided flexibility, and we don't have any moves, unfavorable moves of the rate, we don't need to take foreign currency loans, and hryvnia is more attractive for lending, and that's love for hryvnia loans should stay even for the future. And really, this portfolio that is formed now, the growth that we see right now, to a great extent, it is connected with the growth of the state support programs. The colleagues will talk more about it, but what I would like to mention is that, especially in the last months, we can see that the portfolios are growing, also for the financial institutions of the banks who are not active participants of 579, and in general, they are issued outside of this program. And in reality, that is also a good indicator already of the market-based approach, and we have the factor of the bigger capability, higher demand for loans, and from the other hand, the price is coming with lower rates. We can see that the loan rates are slowly but going down. Also, it's important to mention that the banks are being careful, mentioning that for the future they would be more willing to do lending. We're not talking about the weakening of the lending standards. No, it's not like that. It's not that the bank have done the lowering, but more openness to new lending. It's already seen, including in our research. And in this, there is one important aspect which I wanted to also bring your attention to. It's a bigger and bigger role of small and medium business in this lending. More than half of the portfolio is provided by the SME loans. Out of them, the great number of borrowers are coming from the business groups. So this is not purely small business. This is this big business which is structured in such a way, but in general, some 15% of the loans are given to companies who are not members of the business groups. This are small and medium-sized companies, and they're a very good trigger of this lending because they are reacting to trends quicker. Recovery started quicker than from the big business in terms of lending, basically on our information. So it's a bigger share of SME in lending. That's also a good tendency because in general in economy, this segment is also very important for its development. For the future, we see that the banks, although there are conditions which are still difficult, albeit the risks, they see that to do lending it's important. They're ready to do this, not only in the framework of the state programs, although they are now using these possibilities to a great extent. The main requirement is the transparency of clients, understanding their business, and very importantly, that from this point of view, that the small business, the micro business becomes more understandable, more transparent, bankable. The one can receive lending. That's my vision, looking at the things that you have asked me to look. Many thanks, Pervin. Let us talk now about the role of 579 program, of the state lending program. Looking at the graph in our presentation, that the share of loans within 579 has been growing, and it has become already the third. That's quite significant. This was calling a lot of concern from our international partners, International Monetary Fund, not because the indicator is growing, but because this is a significant spending of the state budget for the support of lending. Andriy Hapon, the executive director of the Fund for the Development of Entrepreneurship. First of all, my question is to which extent is resilient from the point of view of the state support of lending? How sustainable is this tendency? Is this share not too high, the one that I have mentioned about? Does it have to change some way in accordance with the strategic priorities of the state? And one other very important question, it's not mine, it came also from the registration. Please also reply to it, how effective it is to have the all the government support within this 579 program. Then the name doesn't correspond to the objectives and the original objectives, and the monitoring is getting worse. So these are the two questions for you. Thank you so much for the invitation, and let me start from this question about the role of 579 and its place in the overall place of small and medium business lending. Looking at this volume, I do have such a concern, actually for the second year, because our program was aimed at investment improvement, and it should serve the issue of supporting the ones who could not get the loans otherwise. Those who were not able to get loans who, thanks to the compensation, could count on financing of their investment projects. So it happened in such a way that this program, the first stage of this program, coincided with the first crisis that came to Ukraine. This was the COVID times, when we had a lot of diversification for this. The working capital came out, the rates for zero, that significantly affected the volumes of budget financing. The second crisis came the last year, when the armed aggression of the Russian Federation came, because our program remained the only state support program that helped small and medium-sized business. We had other state programs, they were just closed, and the funds that were aimed at those programs, they simply were becoming the part of the 579 project. That brought a big problem. Our program doesn't need to be so huge and to become the main product for the banks. I'm very happy now to hear that the banks are creating products that don't engage 579 program. And strategically, starting from 2024, we should narrow it down gradually, as the Ukrainian economy will require this. We all know the benchmarkings of the International Monetary Fund that talks about high fiscal risks of our program, and at the same time, we understand that without this program, it will be very difficult for us to continue financing small and medium-sized business. So that's like a paradox. What can we do in such a way that the program would remain, but it would not create such a big share in terms of the whole lending volume of the market? Everything looks simple here. Recently, we made changes to the resolution of the government of Ukraine, where we raised the compensation rates for the turnover capital, which filtrated some people and allowed the banks to compete. The change in the key rate also said that the banks would be cheaper to allocate resource and possibly to create products that would compete with price with 579. We count on that, but these are not all the changes that we are planning. If I now announce what is already with the Cabinet of Ministers, we are not excluding from the active phase big companies. More big companies, we will not be financing big companies within 579. We will be coming back to the system of small businesses that will bring down the expenditures of the budget. But at the same time, I understand the bigger problems. These are the zero loans that we started to disperse starting from 2021. If we take the cross-section of the first half a year of 2023, then 95% of all budgets came to finance loans concluded in 2021-22. So we are serving now the old portfolio, and we will continue to serve it until the agreements are valid. Every time when we are changing the compensation rate for the company, increasing it, these acting agreements remained with the rates that were valid at the beginning of the conclusion. So we have now the crisis component that is served by 0%. We calculated that year 2024 will be the year when the 3-year agreements will be over for the replenishing of working capital that were done during COVID, and that will liberate 3.5 billion hryvnia. Next year, we will see 20 billion hryvnia issued for that. You can see that this amount is of concern to the IMF, because part of this financing shows that it's impossible for us without this program. We can't leave the clients that were engaged in this program, but we could at the same time show the dynamics of the regular financing, regular lending. So I believe when we have adopted the law on the state budget, the development of this program will be at the level of 18 billion. The first months of 2024, we will have to pay the debts to the banks that were purchasing in 2023. So now the program is with some debts towards the banks, which are spread over 1-2 months, which is, of course, of concern to the banks. And I'm looking at the statistics, what we have, and this statistic says that this growth is not so huge during these 2 weeks, +1, +2%. So factually now, maybe this is connected to the seasonality, that the financing this year will not come, apart from one more payment for the banks. But the banks, within the framework of our program, don't confirm the statistics which they have supplied about the increased lending. So I'm making a very logical conclusion that the people are getting lending in some other places, which is very good. What concerns the new additional stimulus for the banks in 2024, we unfortunately or fortunately, we have to implement the system of ecological and social standards, which have to be kept by all the banks who will be doing lending within 579 programs. This is news for the banks, but it is explained very simply. In 2022, the program by 85% was financed by our international partners. After quite a serious due diligence of our program, they came to the conclusion about the transparency and efficiency of our program, and they decided to put inside more money. The German fund and the World Bank put inside last year and this year. As you have heard, there was the decision of the World Bank, and there was the agreement on loan and the grant from the World Bank on allocating 550 million into our program. That will be, at the same time, we'll have some retroactive character for 2023 and proactive character for 2024 and 2025. Also, 50 million euro is coming from this German fund in order to provide compensation of the budget for their spending on 579. That demonstrates a lot, and that's like the first program in Ukraine that is receiving direct support from international donors, which is very much happy for us, which we have created the product, which is very much understandable and transparent, not only for the entrepreneurs, but also for the international partners. But together with loans and grants, some conditions are coming which we have to fulfill. And one of them is the SMS, the ecological and social standard. I think that there will be new changes to the resolution that will oblige the banks to take into account these ecological and social standards by the banks when they do the lending. I know that a lot of banks have started these procedures. Many banks already have this, but again, out of 46 banks, only 8 meet our criteria. So the banks will be in 2024 will have a very interesting but difficult work how to implement these procedures in their work. That's what concerns the issue about the strategic development. And with this, I believe it's important to inform you, although Mr. Yevgen is with us, who is always interested in this, regarding our agrarians who received for their sowing campaign. We had for 6 months, we had loans, some term loans that were expanded until 1 year, and then another year, and then now we're planning another expansion for 1 more year to make sure that our agrarians could return these funds to the banks, because the experts has not yet started to work as necessary, and we have a huge hope that within 1 year we will be able to close these loans. And so far, we have the decision about the extension of these loans, but without increasing the maximum size of financing. So that is also to be understood. It will not be going to increase the financing. Also, especially because of the fiscal risks that I mentioned before, that were also put down in the memorandum with IMF. So this 90 million that we keep for agricultural producers without its expansion say that the sowing campaign of this year will be quite difficult. Quite difficult because additionally financing for 579 will not be there for the agrarians. But there is the possibility for the agrarians to come to some new functions, to new types of activity and become the processors, because now the government is calling the companies to be processors. So we're now creating the conditions of the program where the processing is one of the priorities. I believe that agrarians, that this is the way out in the situation that took place within the agrarian sector. They can rework their processes and become the processors and can get other loans in the limit of 150 million. What concerns the second issue, I forgot how it meant. Could you remind it to me that the program expanded so much, it doesn't meet its name, its original objectives, and there are too many objectives and landing parameters, and it's difficult to monitor it. I absolutely agree with you. Monitoring is very difficult right now to do. This will be also the job for us to develop the new type of reporting to make sure that we would give the statistics to the government, the one that is so much necessary for them. That especially concerns the liberated areas, which are changing, and we need to permanently monitor them. These beneficial parameters for these regions already exist, but we don't see any special loan boom because the military risk did not disappear. It is not supported with state guarantees, and we can't expect any significant rise just at the expense of 579 program. Regarding the name of the program, we preserved the name of this program, and this investment component is really for 579, and I hope this will be the case for the future. We had a lot of let's put it this way, attempts to increase the rates for the investment loans, but considering their small quantity and the small load on the state budget because of that, I believe this is not reasonable. We should make the investment lending cheaper than for the turnover than how it should be, like it is in the world practice. So even if we have the narrowing down of this program, we will keep the investment component without changes. Regarding the big directions, in 2023, we did a lot of revisions when we took out all the objectives and kept only two, financing the turnover capital and the investment loans. But at the same time, the government needs to give certain directions for the ones to make sure we make priority lending, and this priority have been kept. That concerns the agricultural producers, that concerns the processing, that concerns ecological financing, which also started recently. Also, that concerns our damaged and destroyed objects which need to be rebuilt. For all of these categories, we have foreseen additional benefits that can be either through increasing the size of the loan or some other compensation rates. Plus additionally, I apologize. Plus additionally, we create the possibility of combining some of our directions with the portfolio guarantees of the state, which are used widely by the banks and which are the main ones, the main driving factor behind conquering and overcoming the crisis of collaterals. So I believe that we will have only the new directions because we will be doing some more centralized, more detailed descriptions of what is needed for the state. But I also hope that this universality of the program will not suffer. I can see some questions. Do we plan the future development? Leasing is planned, yes, but only when we can receive for the leasing the donors' money, because at the moment the funds that we get from the World Banks, from the German fund, they are coming to lending. Leasing is like a junior brother. It is somewhat deprived of the attention because the size of the portfolio and the number of banks participants, the financial institutions actually, it is less than from 579. We are trying to preserve the parity regarding the leasing and the loans, creating equal conditions, but even sometimes when the directions which we have in lending, they are not reflected in leasing. So I'm planning when we have the next change in the resolutions to introduce some more changes for leasing, but they're not as global as for 579. That also concerns our new direction for the factoring, which we launched recently. The bank's products are not yet ready for this, but we are planning on the 21st of November, first agreements to be signed, and maybe some banks will have this as their portfolio of the banks. So this alternative of choice that we're creating using various financial instruments that should help entrepreneurs to choose the most acceptable financial product for them. So we believe that the development of all these various financial instruments, apart from lending, it will slow down 579. So we'll have the flowing out of clients from 579 to other portfolios. That's the situation what we have with leasing. Thank you, Andriy. A lot of questions arose regarding the program. We have one more question to you to Q&A. Please, could you check that? Maybe you can technically reply if that's our former colleague Irina who is asking this. Where can I see this? Please look at this in Q&A. You can reply directly. At the same time, I will give the words to the floor to commercial banks. Unfortunately, we have this concentration, so we are the fans of the private sector, but the private sector speaker, Natalia, will be the last one. It's not because of disrespect to the private sector, but it's because we want to make some review performances of our state institutions. And unfortunately, Privatbank is still state-owned. We hope that it's not for a long time, that it will become private as well. Evgen, the floor is yours. I understand the situation in Privatbank can be biased by the change of the business strategy and the active focus for the development of small and medium business. But if we go away from what is connected with your activity, how you on the ground, how you can see the tendencies, what was said by Andriy, that evidently we have some demand growing, not connected with 579. Do you see this for your bank? And that is the question that Maxim will also take care of. Good afternoon to everybody. Really, Privatbank today has become the biggest lending bank in Ukraine. If we look at the latest statistics for net loan portfolio, if we take the overall figure of retail and business banking, we have become the biggest. If we look within the retail, we have been the biggest. If we take separately the business clients, legal entities, and private entrepreneurs that we have heard from the news, from the research, last months we became the biggest lender in the SME with 29.6 billion. That is very natural because Privatbank has the biggest number of active clients, 850,000, and some 80% of them is private entrepreneurs. So it's very much clear that these clients, having the needs in financing, can satisfy them elsewhere or in the main bank, which is Privatbank. So the strategy several years ago was approved. We agreed that we should move to SME, the development and the support, and we should have added lending for other popular products that the bank have been using. We are managing this, but it seems like the war has significantly affected the picture of the demand, And on the situation on the market, first of all, for understandable reasons, we are analyzing the top 10 banks, and from top 10 banks at the beginning of the war or at the 1st of January 2022 and on the 1st of September 2023, the statistics of the National Bank shows that the net portfolio of Raiffeisen decreased. OTP, ProCredit, Crédit Agricole, Sense, and Alpha for known reasons. We understand that the risk appetite is not that huge, but Ukrexim, Oshchat, Ukrgaz, Pump have grown, the only ones that have grown, and Privatbank. Privatbank grew by 17 billion, namely doubled its portfolio. Colleagues grew by 5 billion, Exim by 7.7, Pump by 3.9. So we are growing not only from the low base, that's why it's huge percentage, but we also grew in absolute figures. Why? The focus on the micro, small business has helped us. That's a huge diversification. A lot of clients, very understandable risk, because both the average check is lower, average ticket is lower. This can be confirmed by the official program of 579 and the state guarantees, where we in 579 disbursed already. We have signed some 35,000 loans for 49 billion throughout the whole history of this program. And the second bank is Oshchat, 11,000 instead of our 35, and to 30.5 billion. You can see the gap, but if you calculate the average ticket, ours is the lowest. If we take and look at the statistics inside the demand, it reflects the picture, especially if we take the SME segment. Then the average ticket today, in general, that's 1 million, 1.2 million hryvnia. That's the average amount of loan. And if we take the corporate sector, the average, the medium business is 7, micro business is less than 1 million, 650,000 hryvnia. And the average ticket is like this. Of course, we saw the outbursts of demand for lending last year, when there was a possibility, especially for the agrarians, to engage loans with the state support. And naturally, when there is this 579 program and it's affordable, there are no significant limitations to it. There are banks who want to develop lending, not only us, but other state-owned banks. The risk appetite is acceptable, and there is a borrower who can select the program, either the standard with the 20% per annum or 579. I'm not even talking about zero, that was before. It's very clear that with all these equal proposals, the borrower will choose 579. So it's naturally, there is a great demand that is growing. If we're talking about the demand inside, we can see more demand for the investment loans, but I would say that it's too far from its peak. We can see that more simple investment objects have started to be sold. I mean, agricultural machinery, transportation means that are necessary for business, like heavy trucks and machinery, etc., but still at the low level. At the low level is the demand for equipment, which is so much needed for the modernization of economy, for the increasing of the quality of the products produced in Ukraine, and the added value of such products. Naturally, we, in the same way, we are searching for all possible ways, and we will be improving the access to financing to make sure we will increase our lending portfolio and to help the clients. First of all, that's different mechanisms of the risk distribution. The state guarantees It's one case. They played a big role. And in this program, we also were very, very far on the first place. For your understanding, the number of loans that we have disbursed on this estate, it was 17.5 thousand loans that we disbursed versus Ashat, who disbursed slightly over 2,000. So the state guarantees this mechanism of risk distribution help the banks during the war to have risk appetites and grow lending and even do lending where without these instruments the loan would not be dispersed. So this instrument is important. Important is also the usage of such instruments with the international financial institutions. A lot of banks right now are moving into that direction or moving or using them. We have the historical agreement signed in August with EBRD. Why historical? Because EBRD Privatbank was not acceptable for the international financial institutions, and in August this was the first agreement. It opened many doors, and we are at various stages of processing with other similar financial institutions. These programs of risk sharing with international or state institutions increase the risk appetite. That means that Privatbank or any other bank having such instruments does lending that without these instruments we wouldn't be able to do, or would give it, but with a big number of collateral, less amounts, and with worse conditions for the borrower. So we are very much happy that instruments are here. These programs give access to grants. For instance, international grants are proposed for various providers, and Privatbank is one of the grants that is offering to its clients very interesting grants. They are financed from the European money. Also, we have USAID that also proposes various grants, German financial institutions, and others. Therefore, all the banks, and Privat included, will do everything to make sure that the affordable programs that would increase the demand for lending, would ease the life of our clients, and will be implementing the proposals of the bank. If we say in general that we want to grow the investment loans, it's because it's very much urgent in terms of the work of the banking employees. It's better and easier to grow the portfolio if you are issuing the loan for 5 years rather than for the turnover money for 1 year, and you have to renew it every year. So business needs both the turnover loans and the investment loans. What concerns the interest rates, it's clear that the rates, when the decrease of the key rate, they started also to go down, especially in the corporate business, because the corporate business almost did not fit the 579 programs, and it used and continues to use the market conditions, the market rates. So in this segment, the first we see some decreases. Additionally, these clients are very active. If they have some good finances, even during the times of the law, they have a queue of banks who want to finance them, and there is quite a high competition. If we talk about 579, it's very much clear that depends on the government. We welcome the steps on limiting the big amounts, on limitation of the big corporate business. We also supported steps on limitation of zero rates, because gradually these conditions have to become closer to the market conditions. We also welcome the conditions on stimulating for the bigger lending for the suffered regions or in some very specialized sectors that require this support, because we have to think and keep in mind that we should help those who are needed. And Andrei touched on the topic of debts in front of the banks. The fund doesn't have these debts. It's very low. The payouts are coming quite rhythmically. Of course, in the first months of the war, the situation was different, but now it looks more or less optimistic.
Зараз у нас буде трохи
Mr. Evgen, we will have a gap now. I have to inform you that there will be a gap. December, January, February, because the budget of 2024 will be open only in February. So it's good when partners are advising one another in front. Yeah, and I hope that Natalia Gurina will also say something. If the client borrowers have problems, the bankers would like to hear from the clients in advance and are ready to propose various programs of restructuring, changing conditions, credit holidays, and Privat and other colleagues have been doing this. If we touch on the agrarians right now, this was the topic that was touched before. In the 579 programs, I have seen 50% there were agrarians. Actually, in Privat, it's 40%. In Raiffeisen, there are also quite a lot of them. Raiffeisen is the first bank on the market of agro. We are the second bank, so we are expecting that this season the borrowers will be more difficult with the repayment, and it will be even more difficult next year with the financing, because the finances of the agrarians, for the understandable reasons, look worse than previous years. These are the problems related to exports. That's a very expensive logistics, not rhythmical. It's low world prices for many products. So therefore, to make sure that the needs of the next year would be financed on time and effectively, we proposed to the government to consider various options to continue the support, and we are very happy that such options will be approved. That's all from my side. In case you have any questions, I'm ready to answer, or in chat. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Evgen. I just want to reflect on what you have said, apart from the lending, also about the grant support. Really, the Center of Economic Strategy in the framework of one of the projects is researching to which effective is such an influence of such programs. So having this right of the newly established moderator when Gleb had to go, if we have the representatives of the micro, small, and medium businesses, please search for such opportunities. Do apply to this fund of the development of entrepreneurship together with the Ukrainian bank, supported by the international partners. We give such possibilities, and that's a very good support for those businesses who don't have the possibility to receive loans. Finally, we are coming to the private bank. Ms. Natalia Gurina, the deputy head of the board, of the management board of Privatbank. Ms. Natalia, Raiffeisen is the biggest private bank of Ukraine, and if I'm not mistaken, the biggest private bank that participates in 579 program. I mean, by the number of loans that the bank is, with the help of the assistance of the program, is giving to business. I have several questions to you. The first one is similar to what Gleb was posing to Yevgen Zagraev. Do you see the growth of demand for loans outside of 579 program? And what is the dynamics here? As well as you as the representative of the private bank, in your opinion, whether the state policy of the supporting lending, does it provide the equal conditions for state-owned and the private banks? And the third question to you, Raiffeisen Bank, as the member of the international group, whether now the group has become more open to increasing the lending portfolio during the war, because the risks remain quite high. What can you say from that respect? Also, I would like to remind you, I'm Maxim Simalyuk. I'm the economist of the Center of Economic Strategy. I'm finalizing the moderation of this event because Gleb Vyshinsky was forced to go to another event. Ms. Natalia, the floor is yours. Thank you, Maxim. The only thing which I would like to comment immediately is that I would break in to your team, and I will tell you about whether there is life on Mars outside of this program. Because the program is good for the time being. Raiffeisen is not the member of this program, but I will explain to you where the clients are receiving lending because he sees the growth, but it's here and it's not within the 579 program. Yes, they are receiving lending, and really today we continue lending, and really I can't say that there is the line of clients like it was before the war, but we see the increase of the demand and the increase. Actually, it's agro, it has always been. It's our key sector in Ukraine. We can see the increase in demand in logistics, in everything that is connected with bio, with the energy efficiency, and the clients are coming. They're coming in corporate business and in small business. So the answer to your question, whether we see the growth, quite gradual, quite moderate, but we see it. And if we talk about Raiffeisen, as about the bank, as was correctly mentioned by Yevgen, we are number one, irrespective of the fact that the loans are issued outside of the 579 program. We continue to do lending, and this will be the overlap with the third question when you asked whether the group has become more open for lending. I just want to reply back, or was it nobody said it was closed, because starting from the first week of the war, we supported and have continued to support. And before the war, we had also the stable growth of our loan portfolios in all directions since the beginning of the war. I can tell you without any problem that we were the first bank who made the gap of all templates in terms of lending during the war than ever we had before. And we concurred with our mother company the support of the economy of Ukraine in the beginning of March. We are the not state-owned banks. We were supporting the economy of Ukraine by supporting our agri clients. They were the first ones. Then we went into all critically important sectors and we continued that support. Now, if we look at our figures, this is not always that the regulator sees it, because in lending we have the understanding of issued loans and repaid loans. And if we take issued loans, we as Raiffeisen, as the Ukrainian Raiffeisen since the beginning of the war, we have done the lending of more than 160 billion of loans. And this year, I can tell you that the biggest part was outside of 579 as the result. So I think the third question must be closed. It's not that we became more close. We, in accordance with all the rights of if something is unknown, close the gate and wait. We learn to forecast and come to our borrowers and make our forecasts almost with blind eyes. We learned to make loans with some new ways. The geopolitical risks and in terms of the risks of deteriorating the financial condition of the borrowers, we learned to talk with clients and to talk a lot with them. If we talk about, when you talk about the risk of crediting, since the beginning of the war, the situation has become different. Our main approach to the small business and to the corporate clients, of course, the corporate clients are big, and the small business, including that, we are making lending of small businesses since a long time, especially from the point of view how you, as the client, and we were looking also at the needs of the client. I can say that starting from September, we can see the growth in requests that are coming over and the clients who are ready to stay outside of the program. Of course, that's an additional load on them, but the life exists in parallel, and that's what was said today. by the colleagues. Pervin said about it that we need to come and with the love to hryvnia. We absolutely support that. It's our policy. We understand that it's more expensive for clients, especially if it's not a part of the program. But it also depends on how the client trusts the bank, and how the client has also, the bank has been able to build up the relationship, to which extent the clients have gone through not one crisis with you and they entered the war. So that level of trust is important for all of these elements. So during lending, we are moving. I also wanted to mention that it's important, that was mentioned today, about the transparency of clients. I can say yes, that is very important aspect, especially when you are coming with the client into the war. I say this, that you can work on trust further, because not that's the mass retail, although we do the lending of the credit business, but that's also about the level of trust. The transparency of clients is also connected to the transparency of the banking system and the mutual respect that we have with the banks operating in the market. If you are within the framework of the program, not all these state-owned banks, sometimes it's commercial banks, they are within this state support program, that everybody understands. It's very easy for the client to propose. We have compensation, and it's very easy to. But what is the signal of the healthiness of the banking system is when some bank is exiting the program and nobody is trying to catch the clients of these clients, because you have the good customer profile and we know how to take them and we will do the lending. I'm talking openly about it because such situation has existed on the market, and we should say about it very openly, looking into the eyes, and some of the eyes are just in front of me. And that's an important aspect, and we have to understand it, that we are all in the same boat. We're working for the benefit of Ukraine. We have one objective, is the victory and support of our clients in the periods of the war and after the war. So all of these aspects are taken into account. We will support you, we will do the lending, and this Andriy Gapon, what he said is very important. We are moving into this. Much has been done. I will not stop because we're now running out of time. But I know for the banking system of Ukraine, for our clients, it will be an important way to go through all of the stages and understand what it is, how to increase lending, how to meet all the clients. We as the bank, all of our policies are done for lending, and we are also moving into that direction to our clients, as to the corporate as well as to the small business. I guess that's all what I wanted to mention from the main ones. I think that's it. Thank you. Thank you, Natalia, for your words, and to Raiffeisenbank for continuing to work and growing your work in growing your operation in Ukraine. All of the banks will continue to work under such conditions. That's very important for our economy and for our society. We have just a few minutes left until we finish our event. Colleagues, if anyone would like to add something or to say something, maybe to reflect to what you have heard after your performances, if there is such a wish, please, the floor is yours. I said in the beginning, and this was my expectation, that the banks are thinking how to do the lending further in a correct way, which sectors are. I can see now from my position that this is really the case. We heard from various perspectives. Really, the main job right now for the banks is how to cooperate with clients, how to find them, how to give them that product that is very much needed for them in that currency that is needed for them, using those instruments which are on the market. That's not only the state support that will give the best access to such a loan, but that's also something about Natalia said, many thanks to her. It's important that it's this proposal from the banks would be finding compromise and finding interest by the banks. This is something that we say in the financial sector when we're trying to protect us from some critical arguments about our lack of flexibility. We're saying that the financial sector does everything to be ready to do the lending. In addition to that, we have to see same transparency, effectiveness, and rationality on behalf of the business. This is also very important. So I hope the more we go, the more we find these common grounds, the fact that the lending grows during the war and quite sustainably, that is a good signal. Thank you, Ms. Pervin, for such an inspiring conclusion and for summarizing. Mr. Andriy would like to add something. I just wanted to confirm what was said by Ms. Pervin, because really one of the hidden objectives of the 579 program was the targeting of business, and we have really achieved a lot in this without the business doing very transparent their business. It will be difficult for them to receive support within the 579 program. And we not only stimulated business to get out and show their face, we also stimulate that they would be disciplined in terms of payments. Because as you can see, the growth of the NPL within the framework of our program, it also in a way that we are quite limiting this process, because if you now can pay 5, 7 or 9%, it's better to pay now 5, 7 than to pay 25 or 23. So I also believe that we have reached quite a good level. And many thanks to our banks who are really doing a good assessment of the clients. And I believe that in this direction, the program will not change. We will continue to convince you on that. Thank you, Mr. Andriy. And in general, that 579 program continues to work. I really hope that the role will be lower and will be coming back to a more healthy and classical commercial lending, because that's a more correct for some long-term economical growth. Many thanks to all for the participation. First of all, the participants of the event for joining. Thank you for your time. Thank you for experts, to all the participants and attendees. Let me remind you that you can find the recording on YouTube channels, on the YouTube channel of the Center of Economic Strategies. You can see the presentation from this event also on our website with 2 languages. I suggest that you also monitor the tracker that we have. Wish everybody safe and quiet evening and good weekend. Thank you. Goodbye.